All right, this is section 29, the home stretch as it relates to all of our information on the Export Administration regulations. As you'll see in our title, we're going to be talking about record keeping. When we finish up with record keeping, we're going to start a whole new section on sanctions and other government agencies like the Office of Foreign Assets Controls from the U.S. Department of Treasury. But we have to finish this up first. So let's do just that. So even after going through all of this hard work, we can't discard it. We have to have official record-keeping activities, and they are found, the requirements for record keeping are found in Part 762 of the Export Administration Regulations. The requirements for record keeping are based on the following four types of transactions, which are pretty much all-encompassing. Transactions involving restrictive trade practices or boycotts in Part 760, we just got through talking about that. Exports of commodities, software, or technology from the U.S., and any known re-exports, transshipments, or diversions of items from the U.S. That's a very all-encompassing sub-bullet point. So record keeping associated with those activities. Continuing on, first sub-bullet point, exports to Canada. If at any stage of a transaction that a person outside of the U.S. or Canada has an interest therein, or if an item is to be exported, re-exported, transshipped, or diverted from Canada. That's a long one. And then the basket approach, catching everything else, second sub-bullet point, any other transaction subject to the EAR. So anything to do with the EAR, transaction-wise, and supporting activities around a transaction, there's some record-keeping requirements. The types of records to be retained are based on the definition of what's referred to as export control document, as defined in Part 772 of the EAR, what the definition of an export control document is. Well, it could be a number of things. First sub-bullet point, it could be a license, application for license, and any and all documents submitted in support of or in relation to a license application. All of the things that we send through SNAP are the actual application, supporting documents. That's what they're talking about there. And then, and we'll be going into substantial detail in our module on the automated export system, but for now, second sub-bullet point, let's make reference to electronic export information, EEI, on the automated export system in relation to an export. So there's record-keeping requirements about that too. We'll circle back or circle forward when we get to that module on the AES. Continuing on with the types of records that have to be retained. First sub-bullet point, a doc receipt or bill of lading related to an export subject to the EAR. That's a big one, actually. It's a proof of export at the end of the day. A dock receipt produced by an ocean terminal, a port terminal here in the United States for an export, or the actual bill of lading has to be retained. Any other document issued by a USG agency, U.S. government agency, as evidence of a license. So not just EAR-related, other agency-related documents as well that provide evidence of a license. And also has to be retained an exporter's report of a restrictive trade practice or boycott activity. It is hoped that you remember what that document is. It's Form BIS 621P, the actual report that is submitted quarterly for anti-boycott activities that we just talked about previously. The specifics of record-keeping requirements in the EAR are based on the parts, sections, or supplements that govern the topic at hand. We looked at all kinds of different parts, sections, and supplements, so it really depends. And the requirement, to reiterate, will be based on those parts, sections, or supplements that govern the topic at hand. Right now, second bullet point, there are currently more than 50 parts, sections, or supplements that present specific record-keeping requirements. Some examples of parts, sections, or supplements include, but are not limited to, Part 734.4G, the de minimis requirement. Should be fresh in our minds, that topic on de minimis. Part 736, the general prohibitions. That should be pretty fresh in our minds too. Definitely license exceptions, TMP, RPL, GOV, GFT, TSU, STA. coming out of Part 740, as well as some reports and certificates we see in the last 3 sub-bullet points. Part 743.1 Wassenaar reports, Part 745.2 End Use Certificates. We talked about that. Part 748.11 Statement by Ultimate Consignee and Purchaser. These are just examples of some of the records that have to be kept specific to export transactions. A couple more. 758.1, 758.2, those automated export system records. Once again, we'll go into more detail on that when we get to the module on AES filings. Part 758.3b, routed exports. Good thing we gave a detailed explanation on what they are. We have to keep records of routed exports. Second to the last sub-bullet point, 758.6, destination control statements. Another topic that we discussed in detail. So all of these things are coming full circle within the context of record keeping. And then part 764.5, voluntary disclosures. Something we didn't talk about too much, but a voluntary disclosure, as again the name would indicate, is a situation where an exporter, a seller, realizes that they made a mistake and voluntarily discloses that mistake. Could be a misuse of a license exception. Could be a misclassification of an item. Could be any variety of things. But a voluntary disclosure, there has to be a record kept of any voluntary disclosures that an exporter produces. Well, believe it or not, this is the last slide on the Export Administration regulations. It's been a long journey. Hopefully we've come full circle. We've talked about ITAR. We've talked about EAR. Now we're going to talk about sanctions and another government agency that we've mentioned previously, OFAC, the U.S. Department of Treasury, Office of Foreign Assets Control. We're almost done with this module. It's been a very long one. It's the longest one in the entire Master Export Specialist program. So we're almost done. Let's suck it up and continue on and finish strong.